Today we're going to talk about the solo stove Bonfire. Is it really worth it? Is it really smokeless? Here it is right here. Now they make a Yukon and they make another one called a Ranger, and I think they make some other thing you can put in a backpack. I don't know about the one in the backpack because I've never really paid much attention to it, but the Yukon and the Ranger and the Bonfire are all the same stove, just different sizes. And it's a stainless steel stove. It's, I guess, what you would call a double wall, since it has an interior, and then there's an air gap, and then this outside can around it. Now, I know I have read a lot of complaints about that it rusts, but it really only rusts on the inside, and that's because it gets so hot. The outside of it discolors, and I haven't really noticed any rust there, and it doesn't affect the way the stove performs at all anyway. So anyway, got some trash in there, got some wood in there. We're gonna light it and we're gonna let it burn. All right, so solo stove, the way they contend that it is a smokeless fire pit. It's not entirely smokeless. Your initial fire will, as you can see, smoke. It does become pretty clean and rather smokeless after that has burned down, and you got a real hot, fire going inside, which is kind of like any fire. Once you light a fire, you're burning brush out back or whatever, it's smoky until it's got a hot bed of coals, at which point it's not really smoky. However, the solo stove does do a better job of keeping the smoke down. Now, solo stove, they've designed it, you'll notice that there's holes on the inside of the stove up top. When you look into the bottom of the stove, the floor of the stove, what the wood rests on, is a floor with a bunch of holes in it. And it draws air from the outside up underneath your pile and gives it oxygen to burn. But it also, those holes up top draw hot air from underneath, from the bottom of the stove, and brings that up so that any smoke that's trying to get out of the stove runs into that superheated air, and it helps burn the smoke. Now, that's the theory. I kind of feel like what's really happening is your pile of wood is packed in this little bowl so tightly that it all burns so hot that it really smokes less because it's so well contained. So it's not 100% smokeless. So if you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'd love to have a fire, but I just really hate smoke, I'm such a baby, I can't stand to smoke, I want to wear a wedding dress and round this fire and then go to my wedding and not ever smell smoky, that's not going to happen. But it does do a pretty good job. Now, the stove, this is the Bonfire version. It weighs about 20 pounds. I think it actually weighs exactly 20 pounds. And it's portable within the vicinity of where you're using it. It's not something I would, try to carry a long distance. I have one in my camper. I have a fifth wheel camper, and I keep one in there in a bag. And you'll notice in the video I have the little ring that it sits on to help elevate it up off the ground. If you burned it on the grass, it would kill the grass in the spot where it's sitting. there are a couple of negatives about the stove, and they're not huge negatives, but you should know, because of the double wall design, you don't get a lot of radiant heat coming from the side of the stove. The majority of your heat is if you're above the fire. So when you're sitting in a chair and it's pretty chilly out, like say 45, 50 degrees and the wind's blowing, you kind of want to be close to it because it doesn't have a lot of radiant heat. That's one thing that I would mention as a con. A lot of people, like I said, have complained about it rusting on the interior. I don't find that to be that relevant. Once you have wood in there and it's burning, you don't notice that it's rusty anyway. So, that's really the only points I would make about it. I move it from one end of the pool to the other, maybe down in the grass or over in the yard, depending on where you want to sit or which way the wind is blowing. It's fine for that. It burns really well because of the way it draws so much air in. It thoroughly burns your wood that's in there. There's not much for coals left, no chunks really. It's a good solid burn. So, is it worth the money? You'll have to decide that. But I like it. Though it doesn't radiate a lot of heat. I mean, it radiates a little bit, but I mean, I just want to say, it gets hot enough you can't touch it. I mean, you can sling water up against it and it'll sizzle. But there is radiant heat that's trapped on the inside of the stove. That's really all I got to say about it. I like it. It's nice to have. It contains the fire. In the camper, I keep it in the camper because sometimes you go to these campgrounds and they want you to actually rent a fire ring. That drives me nuts. Or they only have a small number because they don't really keep up with them, and the campground down the road took your fire ring, and it's nice to have this. It's portable and works well. So would I buy it again? Yep. Would I recommend it? Sure. If you got the money, go for it. Anyway, thanks for watching.